Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Noah Freeman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and sitting next to me, you're probably like, who's this guy? It's been a while. It's been a minute, but joining me, finally, I'm not all by myself, filling that huge void, stepping in today. Once again, we haven't seen you for a while, but welcome back, Noah Freeman. Noah, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, it's not too bad. It has been a minute, but I mean, here we are in the thick of summer. We're counting down the days until we've got more meaningful stuff to talk about and more meaningful football. So we're getting much closer. We're almost into August here.
We have like highlight plays trickling out on, Twitter and social media, and there's photos. You see Ben come through with like a band T-shirt, and then everybody was like reading into the words because it's a different on it. So we actually have some things to talk about. They're just not very meaningful things at this time. And again, it's like I always hate repeating things that I don't get to see with my own eyes. And unfortunately, I'm going to be going on vacation here as they open up camp to the public, and I'm going to try and head out there a little bit. But you just you had a little bit of, I wouldn't say a vacation, but everyone's going to be looking over your head like I just was and commenting on your life-size cutout of you and your wife there. But you're a pandemic couple. You're going to always be able to talk about that, grandkids or whatever, man. And you just got back, but that was last year. I was just asking, I was like, whoa, you would have got that done real quick. And I wasn't processing that you had to wait to do the honeymoon. But if you, whatever you care to share, you went to a really cool place. Yeah. I don't want to spill all the beans for you, man.
Our original wedding date was April 4th, 2020. And as you can expect, that was literally right as soon as things shut down 100%. So we just did a little ceremony with just my immediate family and her immediate family as well. So we did it. We were able to do more of a larger one later that year, but then we postponed since our honeymoon was to Oahu in Hawaii. Obviously, you haven't been able to go to Hawaii for a very long time, basically. So we were able to postpone it and do it this summer, it was just awesome. If you haven't been, if you have been, it's just an amazing place, and it was definitely worth the wait.
I haven't, and it's kind of funny that probably the two most remote states in the entire union here, Hawaii, I'm talking to you. You just went there. I haven't been. Alaska's another one. I had an opportunity, didn't go, and regret it. That was a whole soccer trip type thing, which somebody told me there was a moose on the field during the game. They
That's awesome.
It's true. Well, there's someone not too far removed from me, probably about an hour from here. I do a lot of games from. He's a transplant from way up north, and he has a lot of stories, some cool stuff. So it has to be legit. It could just be a folktale. I don't know, but
it might as well be legit.
I was in Old Navy, and the guy's trying to get me to do the credit card thing, and I'm like, hey, you could save $7 today. I'm like, I'm not signing up for an Old Navy credit card to save $7. And he was like, oh, I know the feeling. I'm doing a lot of traveling this year, and I got the Delta Airlines card, and he goes into all the things about the points, and he's going to Alaska, and I'm like, I've been to like 30-some states. My goal at some point before I'm old, gray, and 6 feet under is to hit all 50, so I'll get there. I'll check it out, man. But it sounds really cool. I guess a late congratulations to you once again.
Yeah, thank you.
Might as well say it. It's totally, yeah. Last April. Well, I'm just dealing with this now. I have like a whole bunch of tickets for the Hall of Fame ceremony. Almost not even like 2 weeks away now. Just about Troy Polamalu and Bill Cowher and that. And somehow I ended up with like more tickets than what I need, and I'm like, where did everybody go? And I bought these in February of 2020 and made plans to try to figure out who all ditched on me, and just crazy. And I was supposed to take a trip too. You can't drive to Hawaii, obviously, but when all this stuff started shutting down, I had to cancel a lot of plans. That was in the spring break type, that March to April or whatever. It sucks, man. But finally, still opting to drive. I'm not going to fly. Go to Florida, take the kid to Disney and all that. So it'll just be fun. And that's more of not just a personal anecdote. I'm just letting all the viewers and listeners out there know of programming coming up. There will be something else in the coming weeks, but you may not see me. You might finally get Brian all by himself if he gets off his keister. So And you know what? He's been so busy, he hasn't been able to keep up with the shows. But
Yeah.
I wonder if he even knows if Vince Williams retired. I hope he's keeping
Right,
up
yeah,
with
right, yeah.
stories, man. It's one we got to talk about. We're meaning to talk about rookies today, but we may as well mention the old men, too. What a weird offseason. We were talking about this in the back rooms, you and I, and he always seems like a guy that's had to fight for his roster spot. The whole Rodney Dangerfield doesn't get any respect. He was in there, what was it, Keon Wilson or something, like almost 10 years ago, and Vince Williams is a 6th-round rookie, and he ends up just getting kind of thrown out there, and then he's not the starter again, and then he is the starter, and et cetera, et cetera. Shake and bake with Ryan Shazier, and then, Ryan Shazier going down, and then the whole type of the replacements that they were trying to fill in, because they always felt that Vince Williams wasn't a 3-down back. He wasn't a particularly strong guy in pass coverage. No knocks. I think if you told him that, he would probably say that himself, but he made a heck of a career. Run stopper, hard hitter, being a 6th-round pick, hats off to him, and hanging on is half the battle. Most of these careers, 3 years on average, to be in the NFL for 10 years, and then go through what he went through. They cut him for cap space, then they bring him back, and then he decides to retire. So I don't know if there's any realized cap relief more so with him to go out and get anyone else, but I will say this much. I don't think they're going to go looking for anybody else, and that's going to be based on one of the guys that was drafted this year we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I think the Steelers are set at inside linebacker. I really don't see them going out and spending money on a veteran. I'd much rather they target maybe a defensive back, or if they see how the offensive line shapes up and somebody ends up being a cap casualty, go after them. And I think that's where they're going to be holding their cards close to their vest right now before we hear any other news, no matter how many rumblings we hear about Malik Hooker or whoever else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could potentially see them maybe down the road after camp. And I mean, because we're so close to camp, you might as well see what you have in camp to see if, hey, this might be a dire need. The people behind him might not be living up to the expectation that we thought of, or yada, 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 but maybe a potential trade somewhere in the season, depending on just whatever depth. I feel like it would be, if there was a signing or a trade or whatever the case is, could be potential depth, since you are losing at least one person. So someone does have to step up at some point. But yeah, he's, you still got to give him credit. He's still 31 years old and still playing in the NFL, the not-for-long league, and he made it all the way there. And he was a starter for how many seasons, how many games, and no, he wasn't the best guy. He wasn't the best player on the field, but like we've talked about, everyone can't be superstar athletes. You can't have all 22 and then plus your special teams. Everyone can't be superstar athletes on the field, and teams are, the depth of teams are made up of guys like Vince Williams, and just the character he's had throughout his entire time at Pittsburgh. He's just been, I know all the guys that have played with him are going to be sad that he's leaving. You would have heard Ike Taylor on the Believe in Steelers podcast talk about Vince Williams a little bit too as well. He talked about that a couple months ago, and just the character of him and all the stuff he's gone through. But yeah, we wish him all the best of luck, and at least hopefully he's at peace with the decision he made and the place in his life that he and his family want to go through.
Well, obviously, I mean, it's not like he even decided. He was like, I'm not going to go through this. That's what I was thinking. It's like camp is like right here. And I mean, I'm sure everyone the camp is not their most favorite part of the NFL season, but it was probably just, it's like, hey, camp is on us. And I don't know if I want to go through this again. And that's probably where it came from, so late into retirements as more typical retirements come through. I got to kind of wonder if, like, the initial release, if there was like a little bit of flip-flop and like, hey, I'm kind of thinking this, guys, I'm not sure. He gets released. Yep. Hey, what are you thinking? Do you want to come back? Yeah, okay. Resigns.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm still kind of thinking it over, mulling it over. Off-season, he was definitely part of the off-season workouts. DeCastro was the big missing in action there, and we saw what happened. I mean, the defections, veteran player, but I think Robert Spillane, younger, very similar mold, definitely has some football instinct, has some starting experience, fit right in there. People were asking, I was talking about this on Twitter too, Avery Williamson. And I'm kind of like, I wasn't overwhelmed with him last year. I wasn't too impressed. But then again, that's a week 9 trade deadline addition to your team. That
COVID
then
protocols.
COVID protocols, and then all of a sudden you get a green dot or at least shared responsibility of trying to call a defense you've only been immersed in for like 3 weeks at the most. That's a tall order. Spillane got hurt at the tail end of all that. And, I had a lot of back and forth for anyone who follows me on Twitter yesterday with some folks about like the Steelers and what their record could be this year. And, you really think the defense will be just as good? And it's like, well, we already saw. But when they lost Dupree and they lost this guy and they didn't have Mike Hill or whatever else, this is when they were losing all their games. Well, yes and no. The offense put the defense in a lot of bad positions with a lot of 3-and-outs. Miserable offense. Not even able to score like 20 points. If I pull this up, it's kind of been like the thing that's been happening in the last few seasons. All Randy Fichtner years, by the way, where they just kind of fall apart. The offense does and loses some steam. Here we go. 19 against the Ravens, 17 against Washington football team, 15 points against Buffalo, 17 against Cincinnati. They had the shootout where they finally score some with the Colts. I don't even count the last game with the Browns. Anyone who does is just not paying close enough attention. So that will kind of segue. I don't want to necessarily – I guess we should jump into them just because we're talking linebackers. I know some people are forgetting Marcus Allen converted the linebacker last year from safety, so he's still on the roster. Ulysses Gilbert, drafted a few years ago, back injuries, nagging injuries. I thought he was easily going to be the odd man out here in the linebacker group. And he still can be, because if they add somebody else, especially if he gets hurt and they add somebody else, it's over. He has to stay healthy. He the best ability is availability, as Mike Tomlin is known for, among 100 other cliches. We need to start collecting them and write a book.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to jump right to a 4th-round pick here, just because it seems more appropriate to talk about him here. We're talking about expectations of rookies, and some of our expectations are much higher than others. And I had no expectations for Buddy Johnson, linebacker out of Texas A&M. As soon as he was drafted, I said, that's a year or two off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pump the brakes on that a little bit now. He could see some PT very, very soon in the season, depending on how camp goes for him. Just based on all the names that we've already mentioned, if they don't add anybody else, I don't think Marcus Allen becomes your top option as a backup to Devin Bush or Robert Spillane. I don't know that Ulysses Gilbert will be available to be there either. I'm not sure how they're going to deploy Miles Killebrew. We talked about the players there. Well, I didn't. I actually didn't mention John Bostic and Mark Barron, and very similar. Mark Barron is a guy who played safety and linebacker, so is Killebrew. And these were the type of players they were trying to get that can go sideline to sideline a little smoother maybe than Vince Williams for pass coverage or passing down situations. So we'll see how that ends up playing out, but Buddy Johnson seems to be somebody that's going to fit right into the Steelers mold. And just one last thought on that is he fits in the Steelers mold because of just their scheme, and I didn't really think as a rookie we would see him a whole lot. I think maybe most of the special teams, but now with Vince Williams out of the picture, it's like we're getting the same guy, and then, you know what I mean, kind of pulling him up, but maybe a younger version.
I mean, like you've talked about multiple times on multiple podcasts over the last few years, especially since Ryan Shazier went down, is that the inside linebackers were, quote unquote, the weak spot overall in terms of all of the amount of inside linebackers that the Steelers have had. And yes, they've, like Devin Bush is, of course, like far and away the best inside linebacker. But even past that, it's like you've still always had Vince Williams there. And then beyond Vince Williams, there hasn't been a whole lot of depth in terms of like superstar athletes. So they're basically all of those secondary positions, those backups, third stringers. There's a lot of competition because their playing ability is not necessarily too far apart. They're all more or less pretty close in playing ability. So a guy like Buddy Johnson coming in as a 4th rounder, and 4th rounders are always like, most of the time they don't necessarily work out. Sometimes they become journeymans, and then sometimes you've got a guy like Dak Prescott who becomes a very rare case, but becomes a guy that's a superstar overpaid, more or less. Right? Yeah. But I mean, Buddy Johnson, like you said, there's an opportunity here that I think that was a great segue, that Yeah, I honestly didn't think Buddy Johnson would see even like a lick of playing time other than the preseason, just because they've had some other guys unless there were injuries, and now he's got a chance. And one of the downsides of once he was being drafted and why he went to the fourth round was more he was light. He might have had a little bit shorter arms, and at least the light side, depending on how hard he has been and will hit the weight room, that could potentially be fixed enough at least to where he won't be getting pushed around by all of the big NFL players. But yeah, we'll have to see. I agree. The expectation for Buddy Johnson could potentially become a lot higher, especially depending on how camp is going to sort itself out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and the expectation, obviously, whenever you're dealing with injuries, and I'm tired of having this debate too online. It's like, well, if so-and-so gets injured, then this team is doomed. It's like you could insert any top 10 salary player on any of the 32 NFL teams and probably make that argument.
Oh, yeah.
And in a few cases, the guys that aren't making top 10 money yet, i.e., quarterbacks on rookie contracts, that could be detrimental to a team too. So there's a handful of other guys like that. But we jumped straight down the list because I definitely think there's higher expectations for at least the first 3 picks. And right out the gate, we're looking at, what's he doing? Handstands in the middle of the field, warming up. Najee Harris. This was pretty much our entire SCU platform's consensus pick, and it ended up coming to fruition. Maybe the best running back coming out of college. There were a top 3, definitely a top 2 hierarchy with Travis Etienne, who got drafted immediately after, with pick 25 to the Jaguars. So pick 24 overall. Don't take running backs in the first round. I don't know. Harris is going to be something special. I just was talking about this with the Steelers, their offense lacking pretty much any type of creativity, any type of run game. They wouldn't even attempt to run the ball. I don't know if that's just because they couldn't, if that was part of the offensive coordinator, but now you have a dynamic player that's there. I don't know that necessarily that James Conner couldn't have done this, but it's kind of one of those things too where I go back to like Tim Couch, David Carr. You get a player that gets ruined. They play down to a certain standard, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's better to just clean the slate. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way it ends up happening. But I think Najee Harris becomes the new favorite son in the Steel City. The expectations are probably pretty high. I think a lot of people are expecting Le'Veon Bell numbers. I don't want to set my bar yet that high, but I still think he's going to 1,000 scrimmage yards, adding an extra game. 17 games, this season. I don't think that's, if he's healthy, we know Mike Tomlin and company always go with the bell cow. There's not a committee usually. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. I actually kind of think that the whole 1,000-yard thing is now completely watered down. You're going to be like, oh, here's a team with 4 wide receivers with 1,000 yards and 2 running backs with 1,000 yards. It's going to be kind of messy with the extra game. A lot of records are going to get broken and stuff. But I still think that's certainly an achievement that he should be able to get to sometime, during this 2021 season.
Yeah, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way initially, and I think people need to temper their expectations for Harris this year. I think some people are already placing too much expectation on him already, because it's almost like we drafted a first-round running back. Typically, it doesn't happen, at least in the Pittsburgh Steelers history, that he needs to, like you said, automatically be Le'Veon Bell from the immediate snap of that first regular season game, and basically catapult the Steelers from second to last in rushing all the way to top 5, top 10 in the league. And I don't think that necessarily needs to happen, because first of all, like you all have mentioned multiple times, that the offensive line is part of the running situation. So it's not just Harris being able to come in and do something different. He's definitely a major factor in the rushing game, but he's not 100% of it. And I think just he needs to be lumped into the offensive line, which we're obviously going to talk about here in a couple players as well. But if they can catapult from second to last all the way to middle of the pack somewhere in the teens, I think that's entirely that's an incredible season for a change in running game. That's going up 10, 15 spots, which is just that's really, really good. And they also don't necessarily need with a Ben Roethlisberger who is much better than the national media give him credit for, and the receivers that they've had returning, they don't necessarily need to be a top 5 rushing game. They just need to be average, and their offense is automatically going to catapult from what they were able to do last season, which obviously started out very good and just had to die off. So if you can get the rushing game to where you've got, like you said, I think 1,000 scrimmage yards with an extra game, and depending on how much he's going to pass versus rush and yada, 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 I think middle of the pack, 1,000 scrimmage yards, I think those are pretty decent expectations, and we're not placing too much on a rookie running back with a very different offensive line compared to last year.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, I know the Steelers were in the basement. I'm trying to find, no, not Pro Football Focus. Get out of here. I was trying to find all the statistics. Let's see, playoff standings. Here we go. Team offense. What do the Steelers? When they had Bell, they were still kind of middle of the road, anyways. They still weren't top 5 run team or anything like that. Todd Haley was still pretty pass heavy. I think just if you took anywhere from 50 to 100 attempts away from Ben Roethlisberger, that preserves him. That's a good thing. Let's see. The other thing people don't realize is like, oh, Ben's all this old, and then it's like, oh, he's lazy in practice. He realizes there's an odometer on the car, and he doesn't like to do a lot of unnecessary throwing during training camp. That's been the way he's been his entire career. That somebody along the line when he was younger gave him that bit of advice when they realized he was going to be a franchise quarterback, and he has adhered to it, and I respect it quite a bit because you still got him here.
Because I mean, the way he was playing at the beginning of his career, I think all Steelers fans are like, no, he's not going to be playing into his late 30s just because of the way he was getting hit, the way he was passing and everything, and here we are in his late 30s, and like we said, this might not even be his last year, and he's still slinging it with not a too much decline compared to his prime.
But the run game, it's going to give you a little bit of diversity in your play calling. I think they could finally do some play. They could do play action out of shotgun. It's like shotgun isn't unheard of. The Ravens, they're the worst pass team, and they run more shotgun than anybody else. It just has to deal with the playbook, has to deal with the schemes. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 28th in rushing last season, tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars, actually. 1,519 yards, and they still had about over 150 more than the Steelers. In fact, the Houston Texans had roughly 110 yards more rushing than the Steelers, and they were 31st in the league. That's just how pitiful on fewer attempts, believe it or not. So the Steelers, did suck at that, 3.6 yards per carry. The Buccaneers at least got 4.1 here or there. Is that what it is? Yeah, yards per attempt. Some of them, they're going to rip off. I hate this because it's like I would like to throw out like maybe the top 10 runs and maybe go 25, 30 yards, and you get more of an indicative value here of how good or bad they were running the ball. Ravens obviously were the top in the league, more than double the amount of rushing yards than the Steelers. And the Steelers, all they got to do – I mentioned Tampa Bay because Washington football team, I don't know if that really counts as a playoff team last year. The Bears, they're 25th, 26th there. The Bills were 20th. The Chiefs were 16th. So it's not like you have to have this overwhelming run the football presence. I think we're stuck on the days of Franco Harris, Jerome Bettis. Obviously, there's years there with Bam Morris and Barry Foster and Smash Mouth football. It's not the way the NFL operates anymore. Nobody can really tell you, was there even a slot receiver position in like the 80s or the 90s? I'm being a little facetious there, but that's kind of the direction everything's gone, especially with athletic tight ends and things of that nature. But the Steelers, they were actually 28th in attempts, but again, I think the first 6 or 7 games, they actually had decent, near 100 yards or near 100 yards rushing, and they just kind of abandoned it. The play calling was abysmal. And I think you get a little more variety with the next pick that we need to talk about, just to jump off of Harris and talk about the offense as a whole. You have Eric Ebron, not the most, kind of a reluctant blocker, if that's the best way of putting it, not the most willing blocker. And maybe he's another guy that might admit that. He'll chip someone here or there, but he's not going to get down in the dirt. He's more of the receiving type, I was just saying. So Pat Freiermuth, probably the best overall rounded. I don't like to say Kyle Pitts. In fact, there's even talk, a lot of the scouts, not necessarily from the Falcons, but the scouts were talking about Kyle Pitts, number 4 overall, highest drafted ever tight end, freak athlete, and they're saying he's only going to play tight end in the NFL. It might not even ask him to block, or not tight end, I'm sorry, wide receiver instead of tight end. It may not even ask him to block. So that's why I say what I say about Freiermuth, because he falls here to pick 55, and he's definitely the lunch pail type guy. I think we're going to be hearing a lot about him in camp. We talk about some of the preseason games. We'll see a lot of these rookies get their feet wet and get some more playing time than some of the veterans. I think the expectation for Freiermuth, again, people are going to label people different ways. It's going to be Heath Miller comparisons. They're going to want to be the all-around guy. I think he could do that. I think Najee Harris can be – each of these guys is going to be their own guy. I think Najee Harris can be a Le'Veon Bell. Are they going to be that in their very first year in the league? I think that's a preposterous expectation, but I think they're still going to contribute. I think Freiermuth would contribute more than Vance McDonald, but Vance McDonald was playing 30, 50% of snaps. If that's where Freiermuth is, I could see him moving the chains. I could see him getting yards after the catch that Jesse James couldn't get. I could see him being targeted more heavily in the red zone or more involved in the passing game. Maybe you finally have that 2 tight end set type dream offense that everyone's always been salivating with the Steelers. It's just which wide receiver now doesn't come onto the field. And you're not going to use the fullback, of course, too. But I do see Freiermuth getting quite a bit of playing time, and maybe as soon as Harris. Harris should be a week 1 starter.
Yep.
Freiermuth, he could be a starter if they come out in like a 2 tight end set and they run and they hand off the ball to Harris in the very first play. So he could be technically a starter. He's not the tight end 1 over Ebron, but there's going to be certain situations where I think he's in there and Ebron isn't. So we should see him quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification is rookie expectations, but for this coming season, since their overall career, that could be a completely different podcast, completely different feel since
I'm not going there for 3 years.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's where it's like the Heath Miller comparisons, which I agree. That's where people are going to try and place him into that category. It's very rare for a rookie to have, rookies have outstanding seasons all the time, but typically the rookies that have outstanding seasons, then they even build on that right after it. Like you think of a guy we were just talking about running back when Saquon Barkley came out. He had a great rookie year, but then he got even better after that because obviously it's not the rookie year and they figure out how the NFL works. And Pat Freiermuth, I agree. It depends on how you want to define the word starter. He's definitely going to be the quote unquote second tight end that's going to be doing stuff there. But I think we talk about offensive line and how the offensive line needs help, how it needs to get better compared to the last year. And he's a guy that fits into that, not just in the wide receiver mold, but into the tight end blocking mold, that you've got a guy that is not only just able to do it, because like you said, Ebron can do it, does it, but this guy will be in relative to tight ends is good at blocking as a tight end player, which that in addition to, I think he's going to take a lot of pressure off of Ebron, since he does have pass catching ability to where if they do come out with a 2 tight end set, and again, don't necessarily know how much the offense is going to change with the new coordinator, but 2 tight end set, a guy that's able to catch the ball, that puts at least someone else that they have to keep their eyes on him, which opens up Ebron for bigger plays, and it just opens the field up a little more. So I think, like you said, that all-around talent is going to really help this offense, and those just the first 2 picks are just going to really, I think, kind of solidify much of what the offense has needed, minus the whole offensive line talk.
I'm thinking one thing in my head. I'm thinking like play a Madden and one of these off-tackle runs with Harris, and have Freiermuth chipping in right there, maybe off a core 4 or banner, depending on which side he gets motioned. Maybe he takes the full block, opens up a gap. There's some things there that I think open up a little bit more. Vance McDonald, he played more. A lot of people were saying he was brittle, but he was banged up a little bit here or there. He misses a couple games here or there. But I think Vance McDonald, if you want to talk about Pat Freiermuth and you want to talk about comparisons, last year for 2020, McDonald, 15 receptions for 99 yards, didn't have a touchdown catch. The previous year, he's mostly playing with Mason Rudolph, Devlin Hodges. He still had 38 for 273 and 3 touchdowns. the year before that in 2018, he had 50 catches. This is where we thought he was going to start being a bigger player. And this is kind of like Eric Ebron numbers from last year, 50 for 610 and 4 touchdowns. And Ebron last year was 56 for 558, 5 touchdowns, which is yardage wise, fourth best behind Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. That's kind of where I see Freiermuth. I don't even see him as a 50 catch guy. I kind of see what did I say it was? 38 for 273 and maybe 3 touchdowns. That would be a good rookie season, especially considering there's another tight end that's going to be chewing up some playing time, getting some targets and looks, provided we don't have the drop problems and the Butterfinger issues.
Yeah, that's true.
Receivers, Eric Ebron. It's funny to me, though, that, like, again, I was saying, defending my opinion, which I shouldn't. I should let this go. But there's a couple of times where guys broke their hands or broke their fingers. And this is the reason I thought of it, dropping the ball. Dante Moncrief, for example, although he probably should have caught what was coming his way, those problems still existed with some guys last year, and they didn't get the same type of heat where it was like, get rid of this bum, cut him. And Sammy Coates, and I thought of Sammy Coates because of the expectations, the shoes you're coming into, maybe Phil, Marcus Wheaton, another guy that was always like trying to replace somebody like a Mike Wallace or Martavis Bryant. And those guys didn't necessarily, I don't know if they get that same type of pressure or not. I'm sure they do. They hear it from fans or they see it on Twitter or whatever else like that.
Yeah.
So I haven't really seen as many of the comparisons with Freiermuth, thankfully, from the fan base. But the Najee Harris stuff's definitely out there. Now, the next guy gets some big shoes to fill, too.
Yeah, real quick with Freiermuth, I also don't think I don't think stats are going to be indicative of a successful or not successful season for him. I don't think you're going to be able to look at even if we look at like how many touchdowns, how many yards he has. I don't necessarily think that's going to be indicative of, because he's not going to be the tight end that it's like an Ebron where he needs to have a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns to be able to quote unquote be successful in his position. So it's just going to kind of be depending on what he gets in, how he does, and if his name is called. Because a lot of times if his name isn't called as he's the offensive line, he's doing a good job. And that was poor timing for me to finish right there.
I know. I decided. Well, the problem was with this. I joke about these glasses and cups. Everybody buys me like all these fancy things, and they're nice gifts. But I couldn't get the lid open in order to get a short swig of water, and I barely got any. I had to wet my whistle, man.
Yeah.
I was there. I was not. That's why I was nodding. I was like, yeah. Got the cottonmouth thing going. But totally agree. And I think he's going to posterize someone. Maybe not the stiff arm running with the ball, but he's going to pancake block somebody.
He's a big guy.
Yeah, he's going to take somebody. Some poor corner is going to get lined up. A DB is going to get lined up with them and just get crushed. That's going to be fun to watch, I think. But yeah, the stats. That's the reason why I was saying expectation-wise, I'm not expecting him to go out there and catch 100 balls, have 1,000 yards receiving, and double-digit touchdowns. I think a lot of people had those expectations for Chase Claypool. I wouldn't have had those expectations last season, but I may have those expectations this season based on what he did as a rookie. So that's where you get, the kind of the paradigm shift there between first and second year players. Kendrick Green has got to come in with all the labels, moving from guard to center, Marquise Pouncey retiring. People are already talking, hey, he didn't fumble, he didn't mess up any snaps or anything like that. It's like, man, this is what we got to talk about. This is like the storyline. I go back to Kyle Shanahan, and he talks about how there was a few years ago he just blew up on somebody in one of the pressers during training camp about this guy went, it was one of the quarterbacks, I think, went, this many attempts with this many completions. Like, why are you keeping stats? And this is practice. This is the problem. You expect practice to be perfect. It's practice makes perfect. And that's not verbatim what he said, but it's kind of the gist of it. And that's what I'm already getting. All eyes, there's a lot of pressure on Kendrick Green. Kendrick Green could even have more pressure maybe than Najee Harris came from Alabama. There's a lot of pressure in like all of those games to be absolutely perfect, meticulous, and you definitely have All-Americans and 5-star recruits sitting on the bench just waiting, chomping at the bit to take your spot. And that's a pressure cooker. I think he comes in, this may even be a relief coming to the pros to some degree.
Yeah.
It's a big step up, but basically when you're at one of these very large programs, it's not to say that Illinois they're in the Big Ten. And I know, I'm the Ohio State guy and you're the there's some other team in the Big Ten or something that you follow that I don't know if
Right.
they have a football program. They did last year. They did.
Hey, yeah, they're gonna have a football program this year too. We'll see.
Indiana.
We're gonna beat Ohio State at one of these years. It's gonna happen. It's coming.
I still think about that Iowa game a few years ago, and that was just,
Yeah.
I'll tell you where I was when that was happening too. I was actually at Bernie Kosar's Steakhouse up in Cleveland. It used to be part of it was the Hard Rock Casino at that time, and I remember watching that game, sitting there, and I was having like this giant prime rib that was just excellent. And Bernie Kosar's place was kind of cool. He was a local guy. He grew up where I lived, so it was cool seeing he even had high school stuff there. So I don't want people thinking I'm just this total brown shill over here. He had some local ties and this, that, and the other thing. And he got a Super Bowl ring, just not with Cleveland. So I like to grind that one in on the Browns fans too. But so Illinois, Indiana, you're the Indiana guy. Illinois, a lot of people ragging on it. Hey, it's still Big Ten competition. We know he played guard, he played some center. The athletic skill set is there where he might be just a little smaller, but he's an athletic guy. He could pull. He could do a lot of the motion things that we're expecting to see with Matt Canada's offense. It's just he's still a rookie. There's going to be maybe a learning curve there. But traditionally, and I know Zach Meckler will back me up on this, he says the offensive linemen are always the smartest guys on the field, maybe even more so than the quarterbacks. And you just don't realize sometimes when they're calling out protections and doing other things and adjustments along that line. And that's where the feeling out's going to come there. I don't have a problem with I still don't have a problem with the interior of this offensive line with the Steelers. I think the edges, the tackles, that's where you might see more of the difficulty. But I think Kevin Dotson's ready to be a road grader. Trey Turner comes over. They're going to help Green. I think Green will be just fine. It's kind of a shame he didn't get to do this last year when there was no fans in the stands. So, if there's a false start here or there, can't be any worse than BJ Finney not snapping the ball and everybody else going. So Mike
false start on everyone but the center.
Yeah. Was that John Hussey? Well, it was one of the referees. Yeah, false start everyone but the center.
Everyone but the center, yeah.
Kendrick Green, Mike Tomlin's already said he's getting the first team snaps. As is Antoine Brooks, another guy I brought up, drafted the year before. I said, look out for him. He's kind of playing that Mike Hilton role right now and already got kind of a highlight off the bat. Another Big Ten guy, a smaller, the levels of the Big Ten. It's like the other Big Ten schools and has a lot of highlights, but it's like, look out. I was mentioning that, so keep an eye on him. But not to take away from Green here. These are the guys. Mike Tomlin doesn't say this is necessarily who's going to play, week one of the regular season. These are the guys that need the time right now, get the snaps, and we're going to see what they do in these preseason games, starting with the Hall of Fame game against the Cowboys. All eyes are going to be on Green. I just hope that the chemistry is going to be there because he's going to be working with Ben. And I know Ben probably has a lot of interest after playing a decade with a guy that could be in the Hall of Fame talks at some point, but he was an all-pro, perennial all-pro, and Marquise Pouncey. So how's Green going to work with Mason Rudolph, who I don't expect to play a whole lot maybe in this Hall of Fame game coming up. We'll see what Tomlin says. Dwayne Haskins, who I think has to play, and Josh Dobbs, who will definitely play, if not most of the game. You could see something messy there. And the reason I bring this up is primetime, nationally televised game. People will pay attention probably to at least the first quarter, tune out. They'll hear or see highlights if something bad happens with Green. And I'm going to say just scrap that whole thing. If he has like one bad snap and everybody's going to be talking about how Pouncey snapped the ball over Ben's head in the playoffs, don't. That's not indicative of what Green's career could be or what he's going to be come the regular season. It's going to be nerves, first time playing, and also not playing with, the GOAT. Ben Roethlisberger in this game. He's gonna be with somebody else that he may not be working with as much. But then again, if we don't hear anything from him, that's also a good sign too.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd even argue. We talked about like expectation and pressure. I'd almost argue that Kendrick Green has the highest pressure and expectation out of all the rookies this year, just because of, like we've said, a lot of offensive line turnover. There's just a lot of question marks, and I liked your podcast about how the offensive line is probably going to be better than we think it is, and I totally agree. But it's still like there's still a lot of question marks that we just haven't seen it with our own eyes to kind of see how it plays out. And Steelers fans have been very, very spoiled with the center position over the last very long time, basically, minus a few stretches.
Yeah.
The Steelers have been very, very spoiled with the center position, so he's going to have a lot of pressure just because it's Marquise Pouncey to Kendrick Green. That's a very different situation with, like you said, a potential Hall of Fame type of center going to just another guy. It's going to be really hard to replace a Hall of Fame caliber type of person right off the bat. So, like you said, chemistry is going to be super important, especially it'll be super weird because I know Ben wasn't necessarily planning on getting snaps from another center when the original plan was for he and Pouncey to kind of ride off into the sunset together. So we'll see. But he's obviously Kendrick Green. This is perfect for him to be able to learn from a Hall of Fame quarterback and to, like you said, also learn from some of the offensive linemen that are coming in. And he also, from what we've heard, I don't know him personally, but we've heard a lot of good things about him in terms of just being just a man himself and just being able to take in criticism, being a guy. He's not necessarily going to be stubborn about things. He's going to soak a lot of information in and try and do his best. And it's really early. I like how you mentioned it's like, he didn't fumble one snap on day one. It's like, well, let's keep going on so we can maybe get a better storyline. But so far so good. We're about to see what kind of stuff he's made from. But if he can be an average center, that's really good for a rookie, especially at an important offensive line position.
Yeah, and we made a lot of these comments in the pre-draft process about how a lot of the NFL's starting centers, it's not necessarily a first-round pick necessity type position.
Yeah.
Pouncey was taken there. What was Pouncey, like 30th or 32? He was toward the end.
Something like that, yeah.
Almost post Super Bowl. That his rookie year was that 2010 Aaron Rodgers debacle, which he didn't even get to play in. But yeah, I mean, you go a decade, like you said, definitely spoiled, but again, average can be okay. And my only thought process is like, what kind of, we started to see a little bit of regression with Marquise Pouncey, but still he was able to get out there. He was able to lead block. I just don't know how much in his mind, when you're doing this year after year, 10 years, kind of like the Vince Williams thing. It's like, did you just get tired? Are you having difficulty getting up for these games, getting up to work out and stay in shape and team meetings and film and all these other things? It's very intense. I understand you're getting paid to be a football player and to play a sport, but most people don't realize it's not just picking up a ball and going out to the field, going out to the basketball court like any of us do. There's a lot of other work that goes into it aside from the games.
I mean, Andrew Luck, prime example of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that have been walking away earlier now. They make their money.
Yeah.
They're smarter with their money. The league has really tried to impress upon rookies. They do these symposiums and meetings, or at least they did. They probably do it via Zoom and stuff right now. But they'd have former players come in, some that crashed and burned and blew all their money, given life lessons, and other guys, that were successful and things of that nature, and they hear it straight from that and they're a lot smarter. And that also processes I'm going to be healthy. I'm not going to, have a bunch of concussions, and I'm going to get out and while I can, and have my health and have my fortune and try and live a good life, or maybe plan B, whatever plan B might be. And I mean, most of these guys, we joke about maybe they take basket weaving 101 in order to play college football, but most of these guys, they go back, they finish their education if they hadn't already. They have something hopefully to fall back on, and they shouldn't be big dummies. I think that's a bad label for some of the jocks that are out there. And bringing that all the way back around to the centers. Centers are the offensive linemen. The centers in particular got a lot of responsibility. We'll see. It looks like Kendrick Green's got a good head on his shoulders, as you mentioned. And just because he's a mid-round pick, just because they didn't take somebody else you wanted in the second round, doesn't necessarily mean that those second-round guys, injury cases and things of that nature that are concerning, I believe which of the two went to the Eagles now? I'm trying to think. Was it Dickerson? And Landon Dickerson, I think, went to the Eagles, but they still have Jason Kelsey there. So, they got kind of a reserve, kind of heal up. He could sit. That wasn't a position. The Steelers need a guy that could jump in during the Hall of Fame game and play right now. And that's one of the differences with Green. But I also mentioned pre-draft process. Quite a few of the centers in the league, there may even be a couple that are undrafted also, but they're mid-round and late-round guys. There were only been on average the previous however many drafts I went back, maybe 3 centers in the top 100 that have been drafted in each draft. So it's not a position that is based on necessarily draft pedigree. It's based on how you play on the field. Here's another gentleman, another offensive lineman, and we've been talking a lot about these guys, maybe getting a little long-winded, Noah, but I think these are going to go a little quicker now when it comes to expectations, because the further and deeper you get in the draft, the lesser, I think, expectations. Dan Moore, somebody I think that fell through the cracks, maybe fell a little deeper, maybe he should have. You don't have the whole pandemic-type scouting process happening. Then Dan Moore maybe is a higher draft pick. I think Dan Moore could be somebody that becomes a reliable starter. I don't expect anything from Dan Moore than to maybe compete and be the swing tackle. Again, get his beak wet a little bit, jumbo packages and whatnot. He's the new eligible receiver like Zach Banner was. Just get him a little bit of playing time, and that's going to be his 2021 season, barring somebody else getting hurt. I mean, Kevin Dotson, for that matter, that's the way they handled him. He only came in because of injuries, and he was right back on the sidelines. And pretty much almost kind of in the same area, of where they were drafted both seasons. So Dan Moore, the first 3 picks were like, hey, these guys are going to see some playing time. You're going to get to know their names. You're going to know what uniform numbers they wear. Dan Moore, you probably aren't going to hear from a whole lot.
At least we hope so. Like that means they're it means there's not a lot of injuries, and I don't think. You never know, but he doesn't necessarily seem like a guy that's going to just come out of the woodworks immediately to kind of be a superstar on an offensive line. Usually, offensive line at any level takes a couple of years to kind of really get into, to kind of see what kind of player you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we went from, he was pick 128. We already talked about pick 140, the other 4th-round pick in Buddy Johnson. A little disjointed, but we had to. I've been tabling this topic for a little while to get closer to camp, get closer to the preseason games, and then we had
it worked out.
News. Yeah, we almost recorded the other day before the Vince Williams news.
Yep, we did.
Yeah, like 2 hours before, remember? And I was like, nah, let's hold off to the end of the week. And then boom, it was like almost prophetic.
Right.
Steelers move up and take Isaiah Loudermilk out of Wisconsin in the 5th round. This draft pick bounced around from the actual selection, the slot, went from the Cowboys to the Eagles and Dolphins. It was
right.
They were the 4th team to hold on to this. And then the Steelers take Loudermilk. And a lot of people were like, huh? And I guess, physically speaking, his stature very similar to what they have with Cam Hayward, what they have with Stephon Tuitt. But if he's a diamond, he's going to be the diamond in the rough. They're going to have to polish and find and develop. I don't know where – does he make the 53-man roster? That's something that might even be of debate. It sounds a little crazy because it's like, okay, they traded up and used the 5th-round pick. What did they see here? I think they might see enough to at least – put him on the 53, or they protect him somehow that he's not going to be poached by another team. I know I've been called an idiot for suggesting that they've tucked players onto injured reserve for a year as kind of a red shirt, but I kind of see that happen around the league, and no one's going to admit that because then they'll make a rule where you can't do it. But it's kind of an unwritten rule there, I think. And that's kind of, if Loudermilk sees any time, it's special teams competing with Isaiah Buggs and Carlos Davis, who probably rubbed everyone the wrong way. If they're fighting on the field, something else might have been happening also in the locker room. And your off-field stuff is just as important as your on-field. And if you're giving problems in the locker room, they're going to send you packing. So there could be a spot here for Loudermilk, but it's not going to be much more than when maybe you saw Dan McCullers or something like that on the field. Field goal coverage, punt coverage along the special teams line, kind of like the defensive line there.
Yeah, if I best case scenario, Loudermilk is a plan for the in a few years whenever the current defensive line starts to get older and retire. So
short, sweet, and simple. I like it. Quincy Roche could kind of fall into that too. I may have thought a little bit bigger of a role. Originally, I'm like Loudermilk. He's kind of too big to be an outside linebacker, but I'm like, would they use him on the edge? In the 3-4, but that's kind of where, as soon as Quincy Roche was the next pick in the 6th round, 216 overall out of Miami, Florida. Mentioned him a little bit on the previous defensive podcast. Melvin Ingram comes in as a veteran. They've already got Alex Highsmith entering his 2nd year. TJ Watt, who is turning into just a monster and making some people question if he's better than his brother. Should have 2 defensive player of the year.
Right, I know.
That would help the argument a little bit.
Right.
So Quincy Roche, I don't think has many expectations. If you ever were looking for Tuzar Skipper to get on the field or Ola Adnei, that's about all the more I think we would see Roche, if we see Roche, maybe special teams. It kind of gets a little more difficult here. I'm thinking game days and how many helmets are given out, who's active, who's inactive. He may be flipping around with a few others here, especially now that he's going to be, for all intents and purposes, the 4th outside linebacker on this list. He could even be 5 when we open this up, because they may go with the more senior player of Cassius Marsh, even for just the listing purposes. So when we see that first depth chart, I wouldn't be surprised to see Roche a little further down. Should be playing in these exhibition games. We'll see what he does against the JV talent. But in the regular season, I'm not expecting to see him ball out or anything like that anytime soon.
No, these are, I mean, we're talking about the draft picks now that even do not have a basically solidified 53-man roster spot. They're going to have to fight to stay on that or stay on the practice squad. And he's a guy that potentially, just because the outside linebacker depth, you've got a good 2, 3, maybe even 4 if you want to call it that. But after that, it falls off a little bit. So maybe he does have a chance of at least retaining a position there. But we'll see if he makes the 53. We'll see what kind of, best case scenario for him, if he just really shifts some eyes, he gets to see some special team stuff, but I don't even expect that necessarily this year.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think. No, Calvin Bundage was brought back when Vince Williams. I was just looking at the other linebackers here. So, Roche should make the roster too. I think, if anything, they would probably go with the you got the devil and the devil you don't. And I look at like Ulysses Gilbert, and I know it's inside versus outside, but I was talking about whether they keep anywhere from 8 to 10 linebackers, and this is where it starts to get a little dicey. They brought in Melvin Ingram. If they brought back Avery Williamson, I still think Roche has a spot. He would have to be pretty awful. And I think a lot of people were super excited about where he landed in the 6th round, especially with the Steelers. So they have some time to see what they got there with him. Of course, Ingram is only on a 1-year deal too. So we could very well see next year that sophomore leap with Roche. Maybe he ascends into more of a primary backup role.
Yep.
Trey Norwood, Swiss Army knife, out of Oklahoma. Cornerback, safety, Swiss Army knife. That's what Mike Tomlin said. Mike Tomlin announcing a pick. It's kind of weird. It's kind of cool, too. I guess you could say you could hang your hat on that later on. You get taken in the 7th round, but you have the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers and a guy who would be a future Hall of Fame coach announce you as the pick in a kind of cool fashion. I just don't know that Trey Norwood, he could be practice squad fodder. It's not as though the Steelers have a lot of DB depth. So I got to see how they're going to end up using him, what kind of role he's going to have in camp. Are they going to try and, fit him into like more of a Mike Hilton role? Is he going to be a nickel back? Are they going to try and have him as like the dime backer, that extra DB that comes on the field when they have like heavy 6 DB sets? I don't know. Will he fit in as a safety? I don't have all of the answers. He's 6 feet, 194, so he's, a couple inches taller than some of the 5'10", 5'10" Mike Hilton or something like that. Got a little more weight to his frame. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say with the 7th round pick. Nothing is ever safe. Your job, the bottom 10 of the roster, always in flux, because an offensive lineman could get hurt. You got to add somebody, so who gets cut to make room for them? You don't put, you get rid of the low guy on the totem pole there.
No, I think the best comment for that is just his good news for him is that, just like you said, the cornerback depth after the top 2, 3, even 4 players that are technically, as a cornerback, it falls off pretty far. So there's going to be a lot of battling and a lot of positioning right down there. So you never know. Camp is extremely important. Preseason is extremely important. So like you said, we'll see what kind of secondary person, because I've even seen a couple. I mean, sometimes these depth charts are just so bad, but sometimes like people have had him as a safety position. So there's just where he's going to be on the field, if he is at all, or if he has any potential, is going to be left up to the next 5, 6, 7 weeks or so.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's Shakur Brown, who came from Michigan State. Many people felt should have been drafted, undrafted college free agent. He gets kind of an asterisk on this show, too, before we mention the final draft pick. But we're still within the DBs. And I know the depth charts you speak of, because you go to some of these sites and you see Norwood listed as a free safety with Antoine Brooks, and then Miles Killebrew listed as a strong safety, where,
right,
you go to the Steelers. Let me see what the Steelers have them officially. Believe it or not, I did not have the actual roster up in front of me. They will not have a depth chart. The NFL, some of these teams are lazy. They don't have the right web people working on their stuff, and they don't update it from last year. So you see like some different names. The Steelers actually have theirs updated. And let's see, Norwood. Okay, they've changed his from DB to safety, so he has an S there now. So he's at least listed as a safety. James Pierre is listed as just a DB. So it drives me absolutely batty,
right,
because you've got cornerbacks, you've got let me see, obviously Hayden Lane, Cam Sutton. Then you got Steven Denmark, James Pierre listed as DBs. They're the only 2 listed straight up as just DBs. And then the safeties, Antoine Brooks, Terrell Edmonds, Micah Fitzpatrick, Arthur Millette, Trey Norwood, Donovan Stiver, Lamont Wade. So I know a few of those are going to be camp bodies. We'll see what Trey Norwood ends up doing. I think he has a versatile skill set. I think that's the reason the Steelers were looking at him, and it's somebody to at least throw a dart at and see what can stick. The final pick of the draft, I think, has huge expectations. Mm-hmm. We went from Najee Harris, okay, pretty big expectations. Pat Freiermuth, decent proportion there of expectations. Kendrick Green, maybe larger expectations than all the rest. And then it's like, well, Dan Moore, he might get in a little bit. Buddy Johnson might get in a little bit. Loudermilk, Roche, Norwood. We're not going to see or hear from these guys. We're going to forget they're on the team. Presley Harvin III. And I'm going to keep screwing up. I'm going to be calling him Percy Harvin III.
Percy, yeah.
Yeah, but Presley Harvin. I will refrain from the nickname Brian keeps giving him. But he is a husky gentleman.
Yeah.
Not your prototypical skinny punter. Probably somebody that can knock someone's block off. But since he comes out of college as the Ray Guy Award winner, since the Steelers did spend a draft pick on him, yes, it's a few picks before Mr. Irrelevant, but still the same. They've had some inconsistency at this position, from Jordan Berry to trying to get rid of Jordan Berry and going with Dustin Colquitt. It's the same flip-flopping as we said with Vince Williams earlier, where they're looking for a fit, they don't get it, they go back to the other guy, and it's still maybe not what they want. And I think this is the year that maybe they get what they want with Presley Harvin. My expectation is he wins the job in camp. He's going to have a lower salary than Jordan Berry does.
Yeah.
Jordan Berry's pretty much at the league minimum anyways, but it's still probably close to double of a 7th-round pick specialist.
Just no veteran stuff on it, yeah.
Yeah. So, being the best punter in all of college football does carry some expectations, and the expectation is that maybe the Steelers, for the first time in over a decade, have somebody that's at least able to to do something.
Right.
Flip the field, either these long boots or, at least pinning somebody. And it's been, I hate seeing a shank. And again, when we're talking about anybody who kicks a ball for a living, that it's definitely the not for long league. So my expectation of Harvin is win the job and be the starter and be damn good at it too.
Oh yeah, worst case scenario is that Harvin comes in to at least, and even if Jordan Berry ends up winning the job over him, which I agree with you, I doubt that scenario. I think that he's going to end up winning the job, but at the very least, maybe it's in Jordan clicks something and he ends up becoming like much better than he has been recently because he's got legit competition. He's had competition in the past, but this is probably the best competition he has, and will probably get beat out for the job for that. But like you said, I mean, that's the expectation. And I mean, Jordan Berry wasn't necessarily the 32nd best punter in the league, I don't think, but he definitely was the first best punter in the league. So I don't want to say like it couldn't get any worse, but he definitely, if Harvin III ends up becoming the punter, I definitely think that there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of the punter position on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't mind spending draft picks in the late round on people like this, because really, if what you would have taken the next best whatever, let's just even say a wide receiver, since they didn't take a wide receiver for the first time in forever, like, was that wide receiver really going to get even onto the team? Probably not. And now you even have like a really good punter, the best, like you said, the best punter in all of college last year. You get him for nothing at the very end of the draft pick, basically, and potentially a guy that, like you said, changes plays, because those special teams guys, those two guys, are very important to a team, and they can sometimes make or break games, especially at that kicker position. But field goal or punter, like you said, switching the field, it really helps that defense, especially pin them back, give more time for the offense to rest up. A punter is more important than some people give them credit for.
Oh my goodness, it is, and it's actually kind of funny to see how much vitriol Steelers Nation has for a punter. Yeah. But was this? I've been doing some of the recall articles over at SteelCityUnderground.com, and I'm trying to remember if it was in one of these losses that Jordan Berry he had some really decent games. And I'm looking, let's see, Washington football team, like a 52-yard punt with a fair catch, 59 yards, only returned 9. And then it's a 28-yard punt, but it's from the Steelers 41. The ball's at the 23, so it's not necessarily the best, but he's still trying to not have a touchback. They just get the ball at the 20 anyways. So I don't hold that much to him, but I want to say it was one of these games. It was either that or the Bills game. I'm going through it right now. And 40 yards out of bounds. Yeah, that was a pretty bad one here. Steelers were on their own 19, 4th and 1 with 58 seconds. This is when they take this snap. This is they're losing at this point to the Washington football team, and it's 3 and out type deal. Or I'm sorry, they weren't losing. This was right before the Alex Smith hold on to the ball before halftime, second quarter, and Jordan Berry punts at 40 yards. And the Washington and Alex Smith gets the ball on their own 41. They're practically already at midfield. And these are the type of things that we end up talking about. That was one of them. And there's another one in the same game from their own 28. The Steelers, Berry punts at 38 yards only, Washington at their 34. You get a guy that could at least kick the ball 48 yards, 55 yards. You get a little bit more out of that leg, and that ball's at within – Washington has it at their 15 to 20 yard line. That's a huge that forces the offense for the opponent to call the game differently, to be maybe a little more conservative in play calling, because they could easily have a pick six if somebody jumps a route right there. You're not going to maybe be as aggressive. They might run the football a little more. They might not take a shot downfield and go 3 and out and risk maybe somebody gets sacked and then they're punting out of the back of their end zone. There could be a safety. So it changes a whole bunch of dynamic. It seems silly that we address so much time for the punter, but at the same time, this is how it changes the dynamic of these type of games. Jordan Berry, he averaged Presley Harvin III averaged 48 yards per punt last year in 2020, a nation best. So you're already getting an average right now at 48 yards per punt anyway. So that's, and I like how they also said with his unique body type, considering he is 3 inches shorter and 52 pounds heavier than your average punter. Yeah, and I had Berry up here. Berry was at 45.8 last year, 45.5 the year before, and overall 44.4. I hate the yards per punt thing sometimes. Just
I agree. You don't need to punt that far sometimes.
The net. I did a whole thing on him. I thought the 1 year, maybe it was 2016 or 2017, that he had a really solid year. And I went through and I found every punt that was a fair catch. I found every punt that was pinned within the 20-yard line, and I was finally like, hey, they found their guy. And it's hard to believe he's been around 6 years already. And like I said, they tried to show him the door last year. I'm going to see if I could find this. I think it was Buffalo. I think most people will remember it was like you're really counting on something to happen, and Jordan Berry just totally shanks a ball, and you're like, this can't get any worse than it already is. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to find it. Somebody in the comments can find it for me, but it was definitely during that losing streak where you're like, hey, can this get any worse than it was? Couldn't even bet against Cincinnati in that awful game on the road. So I think that puts a good so, you know what? I'll put you on the spot. I just thought of this. I don't even like to do this type of thing. But early candidate for the Steelers Rookie of the Year.
I mean, I think it's easy just because running back is a position that is typically there are Rookie of the Year or Offensive Player of the Year or whatever is typically sometimes biased towards more of those special, skilled positions. Sorry, those are what I was looking for, those skilled positions. So being a first round grade, being a running back, being a position that the Steelers saw no production whatsoever from last year, I think it's almost going to be easy that Harris will be the Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, it's I'll put you on the spot, but I think we're on the same track here. I don't see any other way around it. It's like it's kind of like, Chase Claypool pops off the page right away. You have the other seasons where you had the one draft with T.J. Watt, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, Cam Sutton. And it's like, okay, there's a little bit more competition there. And, Juju eventually gets the team MVP and ticks off Antonio Brown. But,
and there it was.
You get to put up some of the stats. It's, it's the shiny object. I would love to say Kendrick Green or Freiermuth. I don't think Freiermuth will have as much of an opportunity to vie for it. So I think it's a 2-horse race there, unless it's Presley Harvin who punts the ball, ends up being the guy who tackles the returner, forces a fumble. Somehow he tumbles on the ground and he's up to a knee and the ball is right there and he scoops it up and no one else is there. And then we see him run. Was he at the combine? I wonder what his 40 time is.
I don't remember. That's funny. Yeah. Or Spartan kick someone, basically.
Antonio Brown. But that could earn the adulation of fans and your teammates. And it's just funny. I was wondering if he had a, I'm gonna see if I can find it. I doubt they made him run it because he only had pro days. Yeah, here we go. It's actually an actual Google search term. When you start typing and it like gives you suggestions. An unofficial 4.43 40-yard dash and a 39.5-inch vertical. Dude, man, he jumped higher than me.
Wow. Yeah, it's like I was not expecting that.
This site, it's Nique.com, Nique.com, N-I-K-U-E. If you look up his 40 time, it's the first result, but it says, this explosiveness coupled with his 30 bench reps.
30 bench.
Combine record for receivers is 27.
Right.
Presley Harvin. I'm looking at the right guy, right? Hold on a second. I definitely
the third?
Yeah. Yeah, he's here. This is it. It's called Technique, but it's Nique.net. And it's just for tech. Yeah, it's all about the Georgia Tech guys here. I'm making sure that we didn't get.
That's where it is. Yeah.
Averaged his punts, joined camp. Now, see, I don't see the rest of this here. I'm hoping I'm not telling anybody the wrong stuff here because it's just like, yeah, it's here. 30 bench reps. I find that I can't believe I didn't look this up before, and it sounds like the old one of these folk tales or something like that. It's Paul Bunyan and Babe and is knocking down trees, and that's like his off-season workout. That's what I'm planning to see next as I'm looking at this. That's absolutely crazy. 30 bench reps for a 6'2", or no, let me see here. Camp. No, these are numbers. These are wrong. These are absolutely wrong. These are for Jalen Camp, who was there. So Google, shame on you. Shame on you. Man, I was going to say that just did not sound right. But hey, where'd this camp guy sounds pretty cool too. It would have been phenomenal numbers for a punter. So draft
his
scout.
time 5. I'm looking at Draft Scout, says 5.38. That's much.
That's where I just went to, and it just came up. And as you were saying it, because it was like a 40 low 5.26. And then a high was 5.50. These are Rich Eisen numbers. These are more in line with what we're expecting. I don't know. We may just leave this. We don't do outtakes of the show sometimes, but I'm going to leave this in. I'm not going to splice it out. I hate to give anyone the wrong information, but this is why I do an extra click and I just don't read the headlines. Just a little word of advice to the kiddos out there. So, hey, Noah, man.
Like a 4.4. Wow.
No,
yeah.
4. I'm starting to think. I'm like, this just doesn't sound right. But when I saw 226, I'm like, that's not the right.
That's not the right path. He's over 260.
Yeah, he's 5'11", 263 on Draft Scout. It's like, I'm like, wow, man. And like he's slimmed down. And like, maybe he's playing the wrong position. Can he catch the football? No, if he can't, then he's a DB. So, Noah, thanks for joining me, my man. We're up against it. We're battling a little too much here, but good to have you back. And just enjoy yourself. Don't have too much fun. The cat's away. The mice will play. I don't plan on checking in on the back rooms or anything else. I'm going to be wearing some mouse ears and be at Disney and be a kid.
Right, yeah, have fun.
So, yeah, hopefully so. And just that programming note for everyone. I can't tell you what the heck's going to happen here in the next week, but everyone take it easy. Keep an eye out. And it's probably a blessing in disguise, too, because there isn't going to be a whole lot to talk about until we could lay our own eyes on some training camp stuff, some of the exhibition games that are coming up. And we will most certainly be doing that myself personally when I get done drinking the little umbrella drinks or, adult beverages. So once again, his name is Noah Freeman. And if you're into Indiana sports stuff, go check this guy out. He's definitely I know there's some Big Ten football fans out there, maybe not as many for Indiana, but all Indiana sports, right? You cover
just the IU stuff. Yes.
Yeah. So definitely a soccer team, a soccer and basketball school.
Yep.
Football, they're turning it around. So check out your other endeavors there. And as for me, well, just like, comment, and subscribe here. My name's Joe Kuzma. Once again, that's Noah Freeman. Until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.